Last week I was talking about the perfection of generosity, and I focused specifically on the aspect of giving material aid, and today I'm going to continue by focusing on giving protection from fear and danger. So I thought I'd do a little review about what generosity is. And from Asanga's Bodhisattva's levels, he identifies two aspects of generosity. The first one being a consciousness that is willing to give, and the physical and verbal actions that are motivated by this attitude. And he says the mental aspect has to be developed first. And the attitude has two parts. The foundation is a lack of attachment to one's property and even one's body. It is a sincere desire to give whatever is necessary to those in need. The willingness to give one's wealth, and if necessary, one's life, without hesitation or stinginess. So that's the far-reaching part of it that we can aspire to and not really try for right now until we have that stage. So some of us have been reading Betsy Knapper's book on the grounds and paths, and there's a wonderful section in here that is also something we can aspire for. And she says this: at the time of the first ground, one attains a surpassing perfection of giving. When a first ground bodhisattva merely hears someone saying, "Please give me such and such," a great joy is generated in his or her mind. It is generated just from hearing the sounds of those words. Internally, bodhisattvas have, on the first ground, a practice of the perfection of giving that surpasses that of the other perfections. So, of course, we can't see from the outside that first grounders have a surpassing perfection of giving, but we can infer it from their non-miserly and very happy giving of even their own arms, legs, head, or whatever. Thus, on the first ground, bodhisattvas attain a surpassing practice of the perfection of giving, and they remove even the subtle stains of miserliness. But remember, the first ground bodhisattva is someone who's on the path of seeing. They've had a direct realization of emptiness. So let's just keep this in perspective when we think about the part about giving our body and leg and head and all of that. And so, very inspiring words from Betsy Knapper. So this giving protection from fear and danger, I think is really, it seems like every day this is becoming more pertinent in our lives. In a July article this year in the New York Times, the article starts off like this: Americans are a pretty anxious people. Nearly 1 in 5 of us, 18%, has an anxiety disorder. We spend over $2 billion a year on anti-anxiety medications. So that's the people that have been diagnosed, they've been identified. Well, I'm sure everyone in the room has experienced anxiety. Sometimes in great ways, sometimes in small ways. So this is something that we all experience, just being human beings on the planet. And now I think there's more and more reasons for us to feel anxious. And so there's more and more opportunities for those of us to notice that maybe someone's feeling upset or fearful. And we can just, do what we can with our skill level to console that person. So, the obvious groups of people, first of all, that come to mind are parents and teachers. They're working all day with kids who imagine things, or, the situations are real and they're feeling threatened. And just to make time to sit down and talk with these people, and find out, what is it you're afraid of? And just, talk them through it and find out, are they embellishing? Are they exaggerating? Or is it a real fear? And then to take the measures to help them deal with this. And it's the same thing when we go with someone to a doctor's appointment, or maybe they're having a procedure or an operation, or they're waiting for the results from a test. Great fear can arise. And so again, as a friend, as a colleague, we can do, it doesn't take long to sit down with someone and just, offer them words of reassurance and get the situation more real. I think we have all had the experience of either having a book in the past that was a diagnostic tool for figuring out what we have, or we go online with a symptom, and in moments, we've diagnosed ourselves with stage 4 cancer of some sort. So, these tools that we have at our fingertips are not always the greatest things to have access to. So then there's the giving protection from danger. And in one section of Venerable's teaching about this, she says, it's curious that in the scriptures, they always talk about freeing prisoners as an example of this. So she says this tells us something about the prison system at the time of the Buddha. But let's take a look at the prison system in 2015. Unfortunately, this country in particular right now has a far-seeing, wise president, in my opinion. And again, this is something from July of 2015, where Obama has called for reducing or even eliminating mandatory minimum sentences for non-violent drug crimes and giving prosecutors more discretion over what kinds of punishments to seek. On Monday of that week in July, the president commuted the sentences of 46 drug offenders, including 14 of whom were sentenced to life in prison for non-violent drug crimes. That brings his total number to 89 commutations, more than the last 4 presidents combined. So there's good things happening in this country, and I hope that his stance on this really inspires people in other countries to do the same. And so other examples of giving protection from danger. Most recently, we've got someone in this country. It's amazing how one person can be so effective in bringing fear to the planet. You know who I mean. Donald Trump and his call for a total and complete ban on Muslim people entering the United States. Now, fortunately, people all over the world stepped up to the plate and spoke up about this, which is what we should do. I mean, this is fear-mongering at its worst. So there was widespread condemnation around the world. There were citizens reacting and writing in. There were politicians, there were refugee officials, and they were all slamming the Republican presidential candidate, calling those statements hate speech and disturbing signs of Islamophobia. So I think when we encounter comments like this, even if it's in the workplace, if it's in our family, we really have to counter these statements and not be quiet. That's for sure. And then I've been reading recently that people who are visibly Muslim, especially, women wearing the hijab, are actually now very fearful. They're all over the world. They're fearful to go out wearing the hijab. So I think my role, if I encounter someone in downtown Spokane, or I'm riding the bus maybe, or the shuttle, is to, really make an effort to at least smile at that person. And if there's a seat on the bus beside the person, to go sit beside them, and really reach out to these people who right now are really feeling fearful. So that's another way we can offer, protection from fear. And then obvious things we can do too. I mean, if children are fighting physically or verbally, we can intervene. If adults are fighting physically or verbally, we can do what we can to intervene and, suggest that they calm down and separate them somehow. If the family gathering in the next 2 weeks inspires some kind of arguing, Venerable Children has an excellent, excellent tool for this that actually works. I've tried it in my own family. If people start heading down the road of, picking on each other and looking for a fight, you change the topic. And as she's pointed out, quite often they just follow your lead, and pretty soon they've forgotten what it was that they were going after. So that's a great tool. Protecting any living being from danger. So here at the Abbey, we have a daily practice that we remind each other about not stepping on living creatures. And so we have all kinds of contraptions here to safely remove the insects from the cat's paws. If we're walking on the road, quite often in the warmer months, there are these great big hairy caterpillars. They're right in the middle of the road, and so what I do is I scoop them up and put them on the side of the road. We've recently plastered the property with no hunting signs. And so, we're really doing our best here to really protect life. And it's a great practice, and it makes you really feel positive. And I'm going to conclude with a story that I just love right now. Venerable Chuni's already heard the story. But it's just a great story about protecting life and what it does to the people involved. So this took place, I think it was about October 31st this year. And my sister and brother-in-law were going to get groceries. And they pulled up to a parking place in front of the store. And they parked beside the shopping carts. And they noticed that there were these huge ravens. There's a whole group of them swooping at the shopping carts, dive bombing the ground around this area. And they thought, well, what's going on? There must be food on the ground. And so because they parked close to this area where the dive bombing was going around, they even felt threatened for a minute. And so they were looking around as to what's going on. And then my sister spied this tiny black ball of fluff beside the wheel of a shopping cart. And here was this tiny, tiny little black kitty. And these ravens were trying to kill, they were trying to get this little kitty. So my sister scooped it up, and here's this tiny little thing, and most of its hair had been singed off. There's no whiskers anymore, the ears were singed, the chest was singed, and this little thing was even too weak to cry. It was just coughing. So she showed it to my brother-in-law, and they both said, what do we do? So they took it to the vet that was just 2 blocks away. And the timing of this was perfect because my brother-in-law, they're both grieving the loss of my brother-in-law's youngest brother who had just died. So they took it to the vet, and the vet in seconds said, oh, this little kitty, either somebody tried to burn it, or it was sitting on an engine in a truck and it got burned, or maybe it was in a building that was on fire. So it escaped that, and now the kitty, she said, has pneumonia. So we've got to get antibiotics into this little kitty, and let's just see what happens. It was sort of unknown about whether the kitty would even make it. So my sister and brother-in-law left the kitty with the vet, and they went shopping, and of course then the discussion happens, well, now what? What are we going to do with this kitty? So my sister, interestingly enough, said to my brother-in-law, well, we could take it to the society that, gets animals placed. And my brother-in-law, who was still, so affected with this recent loss of his youngest brother, was sort of like, well, we can't do that. And I think we've got to take this cat. And my sister was stunned because, her husband just barely puts up with the animal zoo at their house. And so they went back to the vet after a while, and they picked up this little kitty, and they've adopted this little creature who's still on the planet, who's now recovered from pneumonia. So they saved a life. And in doing that, they also, especially for my brother-in-law, really helped him with the grieving process by reaching out to this tiny little singed ball of fur. So, saving life is really, it really does something for our heart and mind. So I'm not suggesting that you go out looking for something, for cats that are on the street. I remember when I was a kid, we were always picking up cats and bringing them home because we told our mom and dad that they were abandoned. They weren't. We just picked up the local cat. So, we have to use discretion in who and what we save. But anyway, the generosity of protecting people from danger and fear is a great gift we can give.